Hey everybody, welcome back to New Videos channel, and today we look into the difference between Nuxi, Nuxt, PNPM, create-nuxt, create-nuxt-app, and all the other CLI tools around the Nuxt universe. Here we go. Yes, the CLI landscape in the Nuxt ecosystem has been shaken up a little bit in the last couple of years. But before we get into that, here's an important reminder that the State of JavaScript survey is back again for the 2025 edition. So it's time to give your input on which features you use, which front-end frameworks, which meta frameworks, backend frameworks, testing tools, etc., to give another data point in that big survey and maybe also represent the view in Nuxt ecosystem and your interests out there. It would be great if you can take it. It won't take long. You don't have to fill out the whole thing, but of course it's always appreciated. So make sure to do that link in the description and also right here in the video. But now let's continue talking about the CLI landscape because yes, we can all admit that it has been confusing for a while. Looking back into all the release blog posts, you see npx Nuxi upgrade -- force. Nowadays, we see npx Nuxt upgrade with the dedupe flag. But I mean, that I've already explained in a previous video, right? The dedupe flag. Though, what's the difference between Nuxi and Nuxt? And there's also another thing. There's create-nuxt-app, there's create-nuxt. It is a lot. Okay, so let's unravel that step by step and go through what has been, why there has been some changes, and what's the status quo and what you should use, first of all, to initialize your project and also in your NPM scripts itself. And it all starts back with Nuxt 2 and the one and only create-nuxt-app repository. Back then, you initialized your project with npx create-nuxt-app and your project name here. You could choose your package manager, the programming languages, a ton of UI frameworks. You can even choose if you want to have Park or HTML. And honestly, who's still using Park? Let me know in the comments. You could choose some modules to install with, mainly from the core modules back then, linting tools, etc. It was a long list of things. And this wonderful repository here is actually archived. It is read-only since March 4th, 2025. And this has a reason, because for a long time, this wonderful create-nuxt-app application to bootstrap your Nuxt app was there for Nuxt 2. And this repository wasn't maintained anymore. But for Nuxt 3, something else came up. The Nuxt CLI, aka Nuxi. And for Nuxt 3, for a while, this was the way to go to initialize your project with Nuxi init, to run subcommands from Nuxi dev, Nuxi build, Nuxi generate, etc. Well, before Nuxt 2, you just ran with Nuxt. So Nuxt generate, Nuxt dev, and so on. And you can do this with any kind of package manager because these were in your npm scripts in a package JSON, right? Or for the init command, you just run npx Nuxi init or similar. And that has been like that for a while. But let's take a look why this is actually a separate repository and not part of Nuxt's monorepo. And yes, as mentioned, that's absolutely correct. So this is a separate CLI repository because it's independently versioned. I mean, you don't necessarily want to tie the CLI version if you make bug fixes here to release a new Nuxt version, but the other way around would be quite helpful. Nevertheless, this also went through some changes because in the beginning, Nuxi was a zero dependency CLI tool here. We see, okay, it is 4 MB big, which is quite huge, right? And Nuxi 3.2.3 here and following versions, they have no dependency. Now, there's a little trick though, because no dependency here doesn't mean they don't have any dependencies at all. If we take a look at the package JSON of earlier versions, from 3.2 to 3.8.1, it doesn't matter too much, we see that there are actual dependencies in here, because Nuxi is actually based on City or Kitty. This is an UnJS package for creating CLIs. So in case you are looking for a CLI builder at any point, this is a very solid way to go. Even though it's still under heavy development, it can do a lot of great things. Worth checking out. But how is it possible that the node modules inspector said there are no dependencies? And if we take a look at the build config of the Nuxt CLI, aka Nuxi back then we also see why. We have rollup inline dependencies over here to set true, which means that all the dependencies will be inlined. That leads to the result that there are no direct dependencies and they won't be downloaded, but all the code is just part of the package itself after release. While this practice itself can be helpful to reduce the installation time because you don't have to download dependencies and their dependencies, etc., it also has some downsides. First of all, performance, because Nuxi itself is used for initializing application. That's great. We want to do this as fast as possible, but also for subcommands in your actual NPM scripts. There, it's not ideal because, well, then all the code from the inline dependencies is duplicated, because if it's part of your Nuxt installation, these dependencies are most likely there anyway. And another issue is security itself, because whenever there is a dependency that might need some updates, then you also have to bump the version of Nuxt CLI and inline the new dependencies, because now they don't get any updates anymore. So these are definitely two downsides that were discovered by Daniel earlier this year in January. And he outlined some point that maybe we can have the best of both worlds. Because at that moment in time, Nuxi was responsible for both initializing an application, but also running all the subcommands. And that mix might not be the most ideal scenario. So here was the proposition and what has changed. Instead of having Nuxi everywhere, why not splitting Nuxi up into two distinct parts, one for bootstrapping your application and one as the actual CLI with subcommands. And that's more or less what happened. What we have now, if we run pnpm create-nuxt, for example, and then with the project name, we have this lovely ASCII art, etc. This is the create-nuxt application. And same actually if we use the good old create-nuxt-app. So if we do pnpm dlx here, create-nuxt-app, then we also see exactly the same thing. This new utility that is there for bootstrapping your Nuxt application. And this is super fast. The dependencies there are still inlined, which makes sense, but it's only really there to bootstrap your application. And then inside your actual Nuxt application, you wouldn't use Nuxi anymore. In fact, you can still do because it's backwards compatible, so that will work. We run Nuxi dev here and it's fine. But actually, what you can do now is just run Nuxt build, Nuxt dev, etc. If we run now pnpm dev, we see Nuxt dev. This also works as desired. So Nuxi is more or less torn apart into two distinct things with two different responsibilities, bootstrapping and actual subcommands. Now, the transformation of the Nuxi dependency itself is not there yet, but we're getting there. Daniel defines three tasks here. First of all, having the Nuxt CLI version 3 without inline depth. So that's part of your Nuxt installation, right? Then at the future, you would want to have the subcommands that still run in Nuxi and work to just say, okay, look, you know what, just use Nuxt CLI for that. I don't want to do that by default anymore. And then also drop the subcommand dependencies from Nuxi to make it way leaner. So this is the goal here. It's also important to mention that, yeah, there will still be separate versioning for both. So the CLI will still be separately versioned. So we can, I don't know, introduce new commands, do bug fixes without bumping Nuxt itself, because it is not strictly related, and that's good to go. Also there, if you have any feedback on the whole topic, the issue link to issue number 648 is there. That's always recommended. But I think the plan here makes a lot of sense. And now the question is what you should use to do all the things. The good thing is, as we want to make sure this is as backwards compatible as possible, you can use whatever in theory. But if you want to benefit from the performance also in the future and from doing it the way that's intended, then you can use create-nuxt, so like npm create-nuxt, pnpm create-nuxt, or create-nuxt-app for bootstrapping or initializing your application. And then you can use Nuxt, so Nuxt dev, Nuxt build, etc. for the subcommands, which means that you don't really have to use Nuxi anymore. And maybe at some point we'll just deprecate it itself and say, hey, you should use one of these, but that's for the future. So here is a little bit of the history. I hope you enjoyed that and you now know why things are as they are, why also the step back was made. Eventually, things will still work, so you won't see anything breaking until we might deprecate Nuxi in the future, but this will also be like a very soft thing. Once again, similar to major versions, want to make sure that you have a good experience and you're not like, oh my God, now I have to change 10 million things again. No worries about that, but we're getting there when we're getting there. Let me know in the comments what you think about it, and now you know what you have to choose, when to use what. See you in the next video. Take a look around the channel, fill out the state of JS, and well, this also marks my 2 years of YouTube, a video each week. So yeah, that's great news, and I'll definitely make sure to keep them coming, and I want to know what you all think in the comments down there. Other than that, have a lovely week. I hope I've seen some of you at VidConf, which is running well right now when the video airs. And if not, check out the live stream, right? There is a free live stream available. to take a look at all the news there. Other than that, see you next Friday again or in one of the other videos. And until then, happy hacking.